other parent saying about you? What was the bad thing? And when you boil it down, because there's all these different variations, but when you boil it down, there's only 3 things that the alienating parent is telling the child. And this is important for targeted parents to know, because you've got to be the opposite of these 3 things, all right? And it's unsafe, unloving, and unavailable. It's always a variation of one of those 3. Unsafe, unloving, unavailable. Well, that too. You mean, what if you're being told you're all 3? Right. Yes, and it is often all 3. I'm not saying the alienating parent says, which of the 3 do I want to, they're intuitive in doing this. It's not like they're reading a manual on how to be an alienating parent and then selecting, I'm going to do that one. They just know, from an attachment point of view, what is a good parent? A parent who's safe and loving and available. So intuitively, these alienating parents know how to undermine the child's sense of security with that other parent. All right, so the second strategy, and I'm not going to belabor all of these because I know we don't have time. Actually, I'm just going to see. It's 9:30 and we end at 10. All right. There's no way I'm going to get through all of this. So the second one is limiting contact. This is also very, 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 very common, and it can range from coming 15 minutes early for pickups every Saturday morning to moving away and not giving the other parent, forwarding address and phone number. But the point of the limiting contact is many-fold. Okay, the first one is there's less opportunity for the targeted parent to show him or herself to be loving and safe and available if they actually have less time together. All right, the other thing that it accomplishes, it acclimates the child to spending less time with that parent. As one targeted parent said, I'm being eclipsed, sort of slowly disappeared, right? And it gets the child used to not spending time, and their whole life becomes the alienating parent's home and family and friends and way of doing things, and it becomes sort of weird or unusual to be with that other parent, right? Okay, so that's limiting contact. The third one is interfering with communication. All right, so when parents or children are separated, typically there's some form of communication, whether it's letters, cell phones, text messages, IMs, it's like endless now, right? And alienating parents are sort of, very comfortable limiting communication between the targeted parent. When the kid is with the targeted parent, they want 100% easy open access, right? They're going to call morning, noon, and night and keep the kid on the phone the whole time. But when the child is with them, they're hanging up the phone, right? They see the number come up and they let it go to the message, and then they don't even play the message for the kid. They don't say, "Oh, here, Johnny, here's a letter, from your dad." They throw out the mail. I can't tell you. So many of the people I interviewed found letters that had been sent to them or were given letters. One man I interviewed, his father when the man was 40, when I interviewed him, his father tracked him down, hired a private detective, tracked him down, and gave him his 7-year-old birthday card that had been returned, and he saved it. And it said, return to sender, not here, we don't want you, go drop dead, whatever the envelope said. He saved the whole thing, and he could finally give it to his son, who was then 40. All right. So the fourth one is interfering with symbolic communication. So not only do kids need actual communication, talking on the phone or reading letters when there's a separation, but they need symbolic communication, meaning thinking about that other parent, talking about that parent, and looking at photographs. And we know from research, even with very young children, that to help children stay close, have a loving feeling towards that parent, to help them manage the anxiety of the separation, they need to talk about that parent and have a picture, right? I mean, every parent who sends their kid off to kindergarten knows, you give your kid a little, your scarf or a photograph of you, and it helps them manage that separation. Well, alienating parents are very clear that the kid is not allowed to talk about and say the name of the targeted parent, and there are certainly no photographs of the targeted parent in the alienating parent's house. So it's like erasing the kid. It's like the Iron Curtain, right? The kid walks into that home and the targeted parent does not exist. Nobody says that person's name. There's no photographs. They're gone. And the kid is given the message, you are not allowed to think about and have feelings about that other parent. Okay, withdrawal of love. So if the child shows any positive feelings towards the targeted parent or wants to talk about that parent, the alienating parent will withdraw their love and emotional connectedness, and then the child becomes consumed with anxiety. Oh my God, I'm losing this person. And so they willingly give up talking about or thinking about or looking at a photograph of the targeted parent in order to reestablish that connection. And the people I interviewed talked repeatedly about being given the cold shoulder when they came home from visits with the targeted parent. One person said that she was always given a smaller portion of dinner when she would go visit the other parent. Like the message was, I am really not happy with you. You're going to get the little lamb chop for dinner. One person said he was treated like a traitor, like the enemy. One person said the alienating parent didn't talk to him for 24 hours when he came home from visiting the targeted parent. Okay, I'm going to skip 6 and 7. They're sort of self-evident. Asking the child, I'm going to talk about 11 and 12 for a moment. Asking the child to spy on the targeted parent and to keep secrets from that parent not only is sort of morally wrong, right, to teach a child to disrespect the parental authority of the targeted parent, but it creates guilt and shame inside the child. They've done something wrong to that parent, and that makes them want to avoid that parent even more. So it's sort of, some of these strategies are like, I like to think of alienating parents as like evil geniuses. Like they get a lot of bang for their buck in their behavior. They sort of kind of keep nailing that coffin shut, but the relationship of the child with the other parent. Referring to the targeted parent by first name, think back to that letter, I hate Kevin, I hate Kevin, I hate Kevin, I hate Kevin. It's a way of saying that person isn't my parent anymore. They're not worthy of respect. They're not a person of authority over me. I don't belong to them. It's very powerful. And it's very humiliating for the targeted parent to all of a sudden have your child call you by your first name. And you can bet the kid isn't calling the alienating parent by the first name, right? Referring to the step-parent as mom. These step-parents sort of parade around, to the schools and the doctors, and they sort of just step in and pretend that they're the parent, and it's another way of wiping out and marginalizing the targeted parent. Not cluing the targeted parent into what's happening in the child's life, keeping the targeted parent's name off of school records. I hear this over and over and over again. It's sort of just an erasing of the targeted parent from the life of the child. Changing the child's name. I know this seems like a weird one, but what's the first thing a cult leader does when somebody enters a cult? Change their name. Why? Well, it creates a new identity. You're not that person you used to be. You belong to me now. And that's the same thing. Now, moms do it by using their maiden name as the child's last name. Dads do it in other slightly more creative ways, coming up with a new nickname. Now, well, we always called you Jimmy, right? That's your new name. And then the child sort of associates his Jimminess with his new life with dad, and maybe his name used to be James for the first 10 years of his life, and that was that old person. So it's a very effective strategy, and it tells the world sort of who the child belongs to. All right, I'm not going to belabor this anymore. All right, every time. All right, I want to talk a little bit about cults. I've sort of indicated that there's this analogy. Chapter 2 of my book is called The Cult of Parenthood. This is almost a spot-on, perfect analogy that alienating parents create a cult-like atmosphere. They use the same strategies that cult leaders use. I don't think they're reading books on how to be a cult leader. I think they just know intuitively how to emotionally manipulate their children, how to create dependency on them. That's the core of being in a cult, is you give all your, you give up your self-sufficiency, your independent thinking, your critical thinking, and you become wholly dependent on this other person, even when it goes against your own best interest, right? Every time? I have to do this twice? Okay. The cult analogy is useful because the people that I interviewed felt like, gee, I'm the only person in the world who was so stupid, to walk away from my loving dad and just because my horrible abusive mom told me to, right? And they had no way of talking about it. Now, hopefully with this conference, and maybe we'll get the word out about parental alienation, but until it's widely talked about, the cult analogy helps people understand, and one of the things I say, I don't know if you read the Star newspaper article, but I gave this quote in there, no adult wakes up and says, today's the day. I've just decided I'm going to shave my head. I'm going to give away all my money. I'm going to cut off my friends and family and quit my job, move out of my home. I'm going to move into a commune. I'll probably not eat enough or get enough sleep, and I really want to stand in an airport for 15 hours a day selling flowers for nickels so some stranger can have a Mercedes. That's my life plan, right? Nobody says that, and yet it happens, right? Because the person's critical thinking skills are slowly eroded. Well, if it can happen to an adult who's going against their own best interest for a total stranger, it can certainly happen for a child with their own parent. And when you talk to alienated kids, it helps them understand how they made this decision, right? Because many, many, many people end up in cults. It's also helpful, I'm going to jump to point 3, because we know something about how people recover from cults, and we can apply that knowledge to alienated kids. Okay, and the truism of what we know about cults